All right, let's jump into this deep dive. Today we're going deep into the European online gambling market, specifically Germany, Switzerland, and Poland. You gave me some really interesting stuff on these countries, and, well, they're either already big names or have the potential to be, right? So we're going to break down their policies, the market itself, the rules, and the taxes. Give everyone a clear picture of what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you picked 3 countries that are doing things very differently, each with its own approach to this whole online gambling thing, which is super interesting to see play out, the different results they're getting.
Makes sense. Let's start with the biggest player. First, Germany. I saw some pretty big changes in their policies.
Oh, for sure. The big one was in 2021, the State Treaty on Gambling, the Gluner STV. It was a huge deal because for the first time, Germany had a single national law for online sports betting, slots, and poker. Before that, it was all over the place, each state doing its own thing.
So they went from a fragmented system to a more unified one. But it wasn't free for all, right? Casino table games like roulette and blackjack are still mostly controlled by the individual states. Yeah.
You got it. While the Gluner STP really opened up the market for online sports betting, slots, and poker, the classic casino games online, those are still mainly under the control of the individual states and their existing lottery systems. So yeah, things like how much private companies can get involved still varies depending on which state you're looking at.
Okay, so a bit of a mixed bag there. Now, when we talk about Germany's market potential, the numbers are impressive, no?
They are. In 2023, online gambling in Germany brought in something like 4.7 billion euros. And by 2028, it's expected to hit almost 6.4 billion euros. So it's a big market already, and it's still growing at a solid, steady pace.
And it looks like there might be some bigger economic factors that could help it along, too. That huge infrastructure fund the German government is planning. Could that have an impact on online gambling?
It's interesting to think about. I mean, we've got that 500 billion euro special fund they're talking about. Plus, there's talk of relaxing some of the fiscal policies. This all suggests that the government is focused on getting the economy moving and building for the future. While iGaming isn't their main target, when the economy is doing well, people have more money to spend on things they enjoy, right? So yeah, it could indirectly benefit online gambling.
Yeah, more disposable income, more confidence, more spending on things like entertainment. Okay, so to keep an eye on this whole thing, Germany set up the Joint Gambling Authority of the Federal States, the GGL, in 2023. What do they do exactly?
The GGL. They're basically the main authority for online gambling in Germany now. It was a big change, moving to this centralized system. They do a lot. They evaluate and issue licenses for online gambling. They block websites using IP addresses and even IPv6 addresses to target illegal operators. They make sure advertising follows the rules, and they manage the national self-exclusion list for players. That last one's interesting. Using both IP and IPv6, they're trying to close those loopholes and stop people from accessing illegal sites.
Sounds pretty thorough. But then there's this other figure that really jumps out. A huge chunk of online gambling revenue is still going to unlicensed platforms.
Yeah, and that's the big question. Are the new rules really pushing players towards the legal market? I mean, that joint study you mentioned estimated that about 75% of the money from online gambling is still going to unlicensed operators. So even with the new rules and the GGL working hard, there's still a lot of work to be done to make the regulated market the main choice for German players.
So a lot of leakage there. And one of the things contributing to this seems to be Germany's betting tax. Can you break that down for us? What is it, and why is it causing so much debate?
Okay, so the betting tax is a 5.3% tax on online slots and poker in Germany. The key here is it's not a tax on winnings, it's a tax on the stake of every bet a player makes. Win or lose, you get taxed. And the licensed industry, they are not happy about it. They say it puts them at a big disadvantage because the licensed guys don't have to pay this tax. Think about it. A tax on every bet. That changes the game completely. Unlike a tax on profits, it eats into their margins even when players lose. That makes it really hard to offer good odds and bonuses that can compete with the illegal sites. So players, they'd have good reason to go underground.
So it's making it harder for the legal businesses to keep up with the ones operating outside the law.
That's exactly it. And it's not just the betting tax. They've got annual license fees, the costs of data protection and security testing, and all sorts of marketing restrictions. It all adds up to a lot of pressure on the legitimate businesses, right? And what happens? The black market becomes more attractive. For the operators who want to dodge those costs, and for the players who want better returns or fewer restrictions, it's like a vicious cycle. The German gambling associations, they're pushing hard for a change. They want a tax on gross gaming revenue, or GGR. That's the money an operator keeps after paying out winnings. So instead of taxing every bet, they want the tax to be on the profit, the actual money the operator makes. They think that would make the legal market a lot healthier and more attractive.
Okay, so taxing the actual profit instead of every single bet placed. What about the other taxes in Germany's gambling sector?
Well, there's a 5% tax on sports betting stakes, kind of like the turnover tax on slots and poker. And of course, like any company in Germany, gambling companies have to pay the general corporate income tax, which is usually between about 29% and 33%, depending on where they are and their specific situation. Interestingly, most gambling products themselves are actually exempt from VAT. That's value-added tax. But other things, like the technical platform or advertising, might still fall under the regular German VAT rate of 19%.
Right, so it's not just about the betting tax. There's a whole web of taxes they have to navigate. All right, let's switch gears and talk about Switzerland. You mentioned a market with big potential, but some pretty high barriers to entry.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So in 2019, they passed the Money Gaming Act, which legalized online gambling at the national level. Big step, right? But they're very protective of their existing casinos, the physical ones.
That local first approach. So only those land-based casinos can offer online gambling. What's the logic behind that?
It seems pretty clear. They want to keep that online gambling revenue flowing through their existing businesses and maintain control within their current system. Makes sense from a regulatory perspective, maybe.
Yeah, keeping it in-house. And if a foreign operator wants in, they need a Swiss partner.
Exactly. Unless they team up with a licensed Swiss casino, they're pretty much out of luck. And to make extra sure, Switzerland actively blocks unauthorized foreign gambling sites from Swiss users, IP blocking and all that.
Lots of hurdles to jump through.
Yeah.
But the potential of the Swiss market seems huge, mostly because, well, people have money there.
Absolutely. High disposable income, love to spend on leisure. It's a very attractive market for gambling, for sure. And get this, 22 new casino licenses were approved at the end of 2023, some of them allowing online gambling from 2025. So yeah, the legal online market is set to grow, even if it's still tied to domestic operators.
Interesting. And according to what I've seen, the recent changes in Swiss monetary policy could also play a positive role.
This is where it gets really interesting, how the big economic picture affects iGaming. The Swiss central bank has been lowering interest rates, first in 2024 and maybe even more in 2025. Their goal, boost the economy. Lower rates make it cheaper for businesses to borrow money, encourages investment in growing sectors like digital entertainment. And that could spill over into online gambling.
More investment, more consumer confidence, more potential for growth. So the Swiss regulatory environment, you called it strict but orderly. What does that actually look like in practice?
Okay, so you've got the Federal Gaming Board, the ESBK, which is in charge of casino games, both in physical casinos and online. Then there's the Intercantonal Lottery and Betting Commission, or Comlot, and they handle lotteries and sports betting. They're all about player protection. National self-exclusion programs, strict anti-money laundering checks, tough technical standards for online platforms, and they work hard to block those illegal websites and payment channels. It's a well-defined system, they enforce it consistently, and their focus is on a fair market and keeping players safe.
Sounds pretty tight. Now, tell me about the Swiss tax system. It seems a bit more complicated with all the differences at the state level.
Yeah, it's definitely more decentralized than Germany's system. So while they have national rules for gambling, the tax on gross gaming revenue, the money the operator makes after paying winnings, that varies a lot between the cantons. It can be anywhere from 20% to 40%. Plus, there's a federal VAT of 7.7% on things like technical services for online gambling. Then you might have cantonal licensing fees and what I call soft costs. Things like mandatory audits, contributions to social responsibility stuff, and anti-money laundering training for staff. So yeah, if you're thinking of operating in Switzerland, you better have a good accountant.
Sounds like a real tax maze. All right, last stop, Poland. A market with big potential, but operating under a very strict system, right?
That's it in a nutshell. Poland's got a big population that's getting more and more comfortable online, plus a growing economy. So yeah, huge potential for online gambling. But the 2009 Gambling Act, they made some big changes to it in 2017 to fight illegal operations, and it's made things very strict. They keep a blacklist of all the illegal gambling websites, and they use IP blocking and payment blocking to keep people from accessing them.
And the big thing in Poland seems to be the state monopoly on online slots and casino games.
Exactly. If you want to offer online sports and horse racing betting, you need a specific license. But online slots, poker, classic casino games like blackjack and roulette, that's all controlled by a state-owned company called Totalizator Sportowy, private companies. They're completely shut out of these popular online games.
So the legal online betting market, just for sports and horse racing, is worth about 2 billion euros and growing. But then there's this huge unregulated market running alongside it.
It's crazy how big the illegal online gambling market is in Poland. In 2021, it was estimated to be worth about 6 billion euros. That's over half of all gambling activity in the country. Clearly, there's a lot of demand for online gambling that the legal options just aren't meeting. And a lot of people in the industry are saying, hey, why not ease up on the restrictions for online slots and casino games? They argue that it would bring in more tax revenue and bring a big chunk of that illegal activity into the light. I mean, 50%. That's a huge amount of money going to unlicensed operators. It really makes you think about whether the current rules are actually working, if they're really meeting what people want.
Definitely food for thought. So who's calling the shots on gambling in Poland? Who's the regulator?
The Ministry of Finance, they're the main authority. They handle the licenses for sports and horse racing betting, keep that blacklist updated and enforced, make sure the state monopoly operator, Totalizator Sportowy, is playing by the rules, and they also enforce the rules on advertising, underage gambling, and anti-money laundering. They have pretty serious penalties for illegal gambling, but getting rid of it completely, that's a tough one. It's hard to block access and payments to those offshore operators, Technology keeps evolving. Oh, and one more thing. All gambling advertising that's not specifically authorized, banned.
Very strict control over messaging. Now, how does their tax system compare to Germany and Switzerland? I'm getting the feeling it's more about turnover than profit.
You're right on the money. Poland's system is mostly turnover-based. So for sports and horse racing betting, it's a 12% tax on the total amount bet by players. Doesn't matter if they win or lose, the operator pays tax on the whole thing. It can really eat into their profits. And there's a lower tax, 2.5% on animal racing bets. They do have a license fee, about 100,000 euros every 6 years, but the big pressure comes from that turnover-based model. A lot of people argue that it actually pushes both operators and players towards the unregulated platforms because they don't have those taxes. It's like, imagine if you had a lemonade stand and you had to pay tax every time someone took a sip, even if they didn't buy a glass. You'd have a really hard time competing with someone who only pays tax on the lemonade they actually sell and make a profit from, right?
Makes sense. It's a tough playing field. So, wrapping up our deep dive, we looked at 3 very different markets in Europe. Germany, the big player, but they're dealing with high taxes and a big black market. Switzerland, tons of potential, but tough to get in because they're protecting their own industry. And Poland, a big market with a really tight regulatory system and a state monopoly in key areas.
Spot on. It's really clear that online gambling regulation is changing all across Europe. And as we've seen, the broader economic situation can have a big impact on how these markets grow. But the key takeaway is this: each country has its own unique rules, taxes, and compliance requirements. You got to understand those details if you want to succeed in this fast-paced world.
Absolutely. It's a complex landscape for sure. So looking at these different approaches to regulation and taxation, what do you think is the most important factor for success in online gambling? Is it strong state control, focusing on player protection, or maybe creating a more open, competitive market with fair taxes? There's no easy answer here, but the choices these countries make will have a big impact on their gambling markets and beyond.